That's what I said, into a microphone I hadn't been invited to touch, under the chandelier glare of the Hamilton County Museum's Founders Gala, while $1,000 worth of gardenias tried and failed to cover the smell of panic. The MC froze. The violinist's bow hung in the air. My granddaughter's fiancé, in his rented tux, turned the exact shade of a man, just remembering which camera he'd smiled into. Check. The cereals. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Two men in navy suits I'd only met once nodded to each other and moved toward the display case under its little dome of glass. Behind the podium, the museum director coughed and reached for water he hadn't poured. And on the screen above the stage, the slide with my name on it, in honor of Eileen Porter, hung, waiting to be real. Before I rewind, do an old lady a favor. Tap subscribe if you like stories with receipts, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Cedar Grove here, small town, south of Cincinnati. Now, let me take you back to how we got here. 11 months earlier. I'm Eileen, 69, retired school librarian, widow to a machine shop foreman who kept his voice soft, like a secret, so teenagers would have to lean in to hear him. I live in a blue house with a white porch swing, and the paint on that swing is only new because my neighbor's kid last summer told me it was giving haunted. I told him he didn't know what haunted was. Then I made lemonade, and we agreed to argue about it another day. My man, Frank, has been gone 10 years. He left me a shed full of tools and a habit of rolling spare change between my fingers when I'm thinking. He also left, tucked in the back of our closet behind his army jacket, a coffee can full of pennies his father had scooped from the register at the A&P before that chain store turned into something else and then closed. The day I found that can, I laughed out loud, alone in the bedroom, sitting cross-legged on oak planks that remember every winter my boys came home with salt on their boots. I cleaned those pennies one by one. No, that's not true. Any numismatist watching just flinched. I didn't clean them. I learned that lesson fast. I sorted them. I held them under a lamp. I read dates and mint marks like they were braille. And I picked out 6 shiny little soldiers with more story in them. I put each special penny into a tiny, square oak frame with a glass front and a brass hinge. On a ribbon, I hung a tag with a name and a wish. I didn't know then. What I didn't know then could fill a room. But I did know one thing with a certainty that makes me laugh now, because it's the kind you only get when you're wrong. I thought I was making a quaint tradition. I was making a fuse. Remember that, okay? A fuse looks like nothing until it isn't. My granddaughter Ava was the first. She's the kind of kid who smiles with her whole forehead, always has been. I gave her a lucky penny on the day she came home from the hospital. I tucked the little frame above her changing table and told her mama to move it higher. It's a wish, not a teether, I said. We all laughed because it was a joke then, not a rule. By the time I gave the last penny, my 6th grandbaby, I had a ritual. I'd say a thing over each one, like good witch work. May you always have what you need, exactly when you need it, I'd whisper. And I'd think about the day I had $27 and 3 things broke. And somehow, because I had friends, because I had a husband who could fix a pump with a paperclip, I made it to payday. I sewed wishes into those pennies with my breath. I did it because women like me won't be memorialized on plaques. We do our work with small magic. Life did what it does. Kids became middle schoolers, then teenagers as long and bored as deer, then college kids who came home to sleep like they were paid to do it professionally. They moved to cities with restaurants where menus don't bother with vowels. They got degrees with names long enough to cost by the syllable. They also came home when it mattered. When their grandpa Frank lost hair and appetite within 6 months, our house filled with casseroles and scratch-off lotto tickets, because that's how Ohio says, "I love you." After Frank passed, I took a job half-time at the library because retirement wasn't for me. I shelved biographies and wrote grants on Tuesday nights. I joined the Friends of the Library Board and learned words like matching funds and sustainability, and I asked rich folks in town to care about the things that made them. Some did, some didn't, unless you brought a photographer. Remember that too. Now, if this was just a story about a grandmother and some pennies, it would be over. The kids all grew up healthy, the pennies stayed cute. But the world shifted under our feet. Prices climbed, jobs moved, folks started posting versions of their lives meant for the applause button. And somewhere in there, a man saw a gap in our family. He stepped into it with a silk tie and an apology smile, and he did it so smoothly that I almost missed it until he was already sitting at our table. Ava brought him to Sunday dinner in the spring, the kind of late April day when Ohio can't decide if it's winter still or spring yet. His name was Brent Wilder, which tells you almost everything you need to know. He introduced himself after he'd already told us 3 stories about himself, 5 about what he owned, and 1 big one about his future. He touched the edges of the table with his fingers like a pianist and laughed like he was performing. "I'm in acquisitions," he said. "Specialty goods." My son Daniel, Ava's dad, asked, "Like what?" He didn't ask with suspicion. He asked like a dad trying to understand the man his girl loved. "Watches, art, coins," Brent said, and he did a little shrug, the kind that says, "It's just something I do," but also, "Please ask me about it." "Oh," I said, because I'm a polite woman. But inside me, something small and old folded its arms. "Saw you have some of those old oak frames around here," Brent added not 2 minutes later, eyes moving to the mantel, where I keep photos of babies, a black and white of me in 1974 with hair out to here, and a picture of Frank on our wedding day, looking like he built that suit from scratch. "They're mine," I said. "Gifts." He put a hand to his heart, sincerely-ish. "I love heirlooms." My daughter Marissa smiled so bright her cheeks blushed. She is the peacemaker, my middle child. Mum's got a tradition. Penny for each grandkid. She's better than Santa. "Is that right?" Brent said, and his voice got soft, but his eyes cut to Ava. She looked back with a flash I hadn't seen before. Pride, yes, but also worry. I filed the worry away and pretended to be as charmed as everyone else. Remember this detail. He clocked those frames before he asked what I wanted to drink. That night, when I loaded the dishwasher, Ava came to help. We always end up shoulder to shoulder, me rinsing, her stacking, our language the clink of glass. "What do you think?" she whispered, like we were conspirators. I looked at her, at the cheek I'd kissed 1,000 times, at the little scar by her lip from the time she bit a swing chain pretending to be a puppy. "I think he's handsome," I said truthfully. "He's a lot," she said, almost laughing. "But he makes me feel like I can do anything." "Well," I said, "you can." She bumped my hip with hers. It's what we do when we love instead of saying it out loud, because if we said it out loud as often as we feel it, we'd never get anything else done. The next weekend, I brought a pie to the church spring auction. Our pastor, an ex-Marine with tender eyes, takes off his tie for these things, and it always makes me laugh. The whole town shows up for the spring auction. There's a table of crocheted pot holders that will survive the apocalypse. There's a slow cooker of meatballs every man calls my wife's recipe, even if his wife still can't get gelatin to set. And there's gossip. which is what keeps small towns warm in March. Brent was there, which surprised me. Outsiders don't come to these unless they're either in love or bored. He wasn't bored. He made rounds like he was running for office, complimenting the quilting, asking about the scholarships. He didn't know that when a man in his 30s flatters everyone, the women in their 60s hold their purses tighter. Ava's penny, her lucky penny, belongs to her, but it lives at my house. None of the kids took them home when they moved out. Not because they didn't want them, because they, like the rest of us, keep kidhood in the place it was born. The frames hang in a row in my hallway, 6 little windows into time. My plan had always been to give each one the summer they turned 25. Adult enough to be tempted, young enough to be moved by a gesture. But life doesn't care about plans. A week after the auction, I was at the library desk when a woman I know only by face came in and slid a magazine across to me like a note in study hall. "You know this guy?" she asked. The magazine was one of those glossy regional things rich folks pretend to hate and secretly frame. On page 12, there was a photo of Brent holding a pocket watch in one hand and a glass of something amber in the other. The caption called him a curator of the good life. The article mentioned Queen City Numismatics, his shop downtown, and a private vault where he kept client consignments safe from the vagaries of retail. I skimmed. There was a paragraph about unlocking value in forgotten items. There was a sentence about family reluctance to sell. The way the writer put quotation marks around family when he quoted Brent made my teeth itch. The woman tapped the page. "My niece had a problem with him," she said, low. "Not my story to tell. Just be careful." "I will," I said. "Thank you." I didn't tell Ava. I told myself it was because I didn't want to cause trouble. Truth? I didn't want to hear my girl tell me I was being paranoid. Even now, at my age, the look on my children's faces when I question the people they love can pull the floor out from under me. 2 days later, I came home from the pharmacy to find Sloane on my porch. That's Daniel's second wife, if we're tracking family trees. She's got a haircut you need 2 products to maintain, and the kind of gym membership that comes with branded leggings. She handed me a latte and kissed the air near my cheek. "Thought you'd like a treat," she said. "I like a treat. I do not like surprises." "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I asked, matching her smile with one from my own face, the one I use when I answer telemarketers. She set her bag on my swing and dusted nothing off her sleeve. "So, Brent was telling me about this museum thing. What do you think about putting the pennies on display? For the town. It'd be so meaningful. Generational love. You could give a little talk." She paused. "Ava loves the idea." "Does she?" I said. Sloane sipped foam. "You know how girls are. They want a moment. If this could be the thing that starts a whole wave of giving." She lit up like a fundraiser seeing a check. Sloane sits on every committee she can find. She likes titles. They make her feel like she can fix the feeling that she arrived late to a party already underway. I should have more compassion for that. Some days, I do. Other days, I remember the way she talked to my son in my kitchen once, like he was a purse she'd outgrown. I walked her inside. "Show me what you mean," I said. "Let's look up the museum." We sat at my kitchen table with my old laptop. We found a page about the founders' gala, black tie, corporate sponsors, a silent auction of heirloom quality items. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingers where they lay on the keys. "You think they want 6 pennies?" I said, trying to keep it dry. "Not just pennies," she said. "Your pennies. It's a story." "It is a story," I said. Whose? Her smile faltered just enough to show the structure underneath. Ours, Mum. Here's where I admit something. A part of me liked the idea, not the gala. God save me from ballrooms with their carpet patterns designed to hide spills and sins. But the idea of a public celebration of the small things we do, that's my jam. I spend half my life trying to get people to care about small things. Let me think on it, I told her, and I meant it. That night, I took the little frames off the wall. I put them on the table like a family gathered for a reunion. I lit a candle because my mother taught me to light a candle when questions come. I picked up Ava's. Hers is 1943, copper. If you're a coin person, you just sat up straighter. If you're not, I'll tell you what that means. The 1943 pennies, most of them, weren't copper. In 43, the country pulled copper for the war effort. They minted steel cents that year. A few copper planchets stayed in the hopper by mistake. Those are rare. Rare enough that any time a bad actor finds one, they see more than a penny. Remember this detail. Some people think the only stories worth telling are priced in dollars. I knew years ago what I had, not all of them, but enough. I'd taken them out of the frames while the kids were teenagers and sent them, quiet as a thought, to a little grading company in Columbus called Numisguard. They sent them back in sealed holders with serial numbers like tiny passports. I slid them back behind my glass with hands that shook. Then I waited. Waiting is a skill nobody brags about. It should be. I held Ava's penny in its little case. I thought about the first time she called me from college, with a voice like a bird hitting a window, because she didn't get the internship. I told her then, "What's yours won't get lost." It didn't matter then whether I meant the internship, the boy, or the belief. The truth isn't picky. The next morning, I drove to Queen City Numismatics. I parked across the street and sat for a full 5 minutes watching people go in and out. A man in a too-tight polo, left with a plastic case under his arm, walking like he had a raw egg in his pocket he couldn't break. A woman my age came out empty-handed and sat on the bench. She wiped under her eye and then looked around like she'd lost something she couldn't name. I went in. The bell over the door told the room I was coming. The flooring was that heavy kind of tile that makes you feel important. There were display cases full of coins in rows that made my librarian heart hum with pleasure. A young guy behind the counter moved his hand in a circle to show me the place. He had a beard that hadn't decided yet what it wanted to be. "Welcome," he said. "Looking to buy? Sell? Appraise?" "Just looking," I said, "and maybe asking questions." "Sure," he said. He didn't say Mom yet. I liked him better for it. I asked him about 1943 copper cents with the casual curiosity of a person doing a crossword. The kid's eyes flicked to the back office. "Rare," he said. "You don't see those. We can appraise if you want." "Is the owner here?" I asked. "Mr. Wilder?" He came out like he'd been waiting behind the door for a queue line. "You don't need me for that," he said to the kid before turning to me with a smile that included every tooth in his head. "Mrs. Porter, fancy seeing you." "Not fancy at all," I said. "Just an old lady with a question." "Coffee?" he offered, gesturing to a little cart with an espresso machine that cost more than my first car. "I had mine," I said. "But thank you." He leaned on the glass case, casual. "Let me save you a Google. If you have what you're asking about, Mrs. Porter, it deserves to be somewhere safe, and it deserves to be seen. Because that's what makes priceless objects happy. All that attention?" I asked. He grinned. "Because it increases value." "Whose?" I said. He held my gaze. He was enjoying himself. It is a special kind of man who enjoys talking to a woman his mother's age like he's in a chess match. She doesn't know they're playing. I once saw a pigeon knock over a queen on a chessboard and look pleased with itself. God love a pigeon. I think we can help each other, he said finally. I replied. You've been talking to Sloane? His smile didn't falter, which is when I knew for sure he had. She has vision, he said. I admire that. She has a Pinterest board, I said. Not the same. I went home with the sounds of that shop echoing in my ears. The hum of the espresso machine, the small click when a coin in a plastic holder touches glass. You learn to hear the difference between confidence and performance. He was performing. For whom? I suspected the answer. I didn't want to say it out loud. Sunday, after church, there was a meeting at the house about the gala. It wasn't formal. It became formal. Sloane sent a text. Quick family thing at Mum's this afternoon. Brent has ideas? She included 3 sparkle emojis and a champagne bottle. The champagne bottle told me she was speaking a language that assumed we all had corks to pop. They came early. Sloane with a folder, Brent with a cake in a white box that said Edwards, a bakery where a cookie costs as much as an oil change. My kids came in stages. Daniel with his shoulders up around his ears, Marissa with a covered dish she'd pretend not to brag about, and then brag about when I begged. The younger grandkids did laps around my kitchen island like colts. Ava came in last. She was quiet. Her eyes had the shine of someone whose mind is full and whose hands are empty. Brent did a presentation without calling it one. He spread photos on my table. The museum steps, the ballroom, a mock-up of a display with 6 glowing circles and the Lucky Penny legacy in a font that made me itch because it was both hungry and self-conscious. He talked about an auction. He suggested, gently, that the proceeds could fund a scholarship in the kids' names. He used the word impact 12 times. He never used the word consent. We're not selling, I said, when there was finally a pause. I pushed a glass of water toward him. I very much hoped he would spill. There's a difference, he said, already ready, between selling and unlocking value, Eileen. You're right, I said. One involves cash, the other involves vocabulary. Ava put her hand on his forearm. He took it like a rescue. Grammy? She said softly. They could do so much. Your pennies. Think how proud Grandpa Frank would be. I looked at my granddaughter and allowed my face to be a mother's face, not a strategic weapon. He'd be proud if you told him this was what you wanted, I said. Not if a man told you it was. She looked away. Sloane jumped on the opening. We're trying to include you, Mom, she said with a heavy sweetness. This is bigger than traditions. This is legacy. I met her sugar with salt. Legacy is between people, I said, not people and committees. Now, if you've never felt it, let me describe. The hot, prickly bloom of age, when the people you love decide your caution is bitterness. That happened in my kitchen that day. It was quiet. There was no fight. It was worse. There was consensus. They were kind. They spoke slowly, like they were translating their good intentions into a language I could understand. They put their hands over mine. And in my body, something very old. A girl who got fired once for asking how much a male colleague made and laughed because they said she was aggressive, stood up on a chair and yelled. But the room didn't know it. After they left, the house smelled like coffee and cardboard. I sat on the floor in the hallway with the frames around me. I took Ava's off the wall again. I held it to my heart and pressed until I could feel the cold through the glass. I set it back, carefully, and saw a fingerprint on the inside of Ruby's frame that I knew wasn't mine. This is how a woman like me knows she is right. The evidence is small. It is not dramatic. It does not care what anyone thinks about the narrative. The pane on Ruby's frame had a new smudge. The screw on the hinge had the faintest half-turn to it. Something had been opened. I breathed like a person who'd heard a mouse in the wall. You could say I overreacted, or you could say I put my ear to the baseboard. I called a woman I trust. Her name is Aria Benson. She's an attorney who volunteers at the library teaching teenagers how to fill out FAFSA forms without crying. She is the opposite of a fundraiser. She is practical like a kitchen table. I told her what I suspected. I told her about the smudge. I told her about Brent's ease in my home and Sloane's drive. I told her about the magazine and the woman with the niece. I told her I had new Miss Guard certificates locked in a firebox behind my winter sweaters. Silence bloomed on the other end of the line. Then she said the thing good women say when it's time to quit being good. Do you want to be nice, or do you want to be right? I want to be both, I said, because the habit is old, but she knows me. I heard her smile through the phone. Come by my office, she said. Bring the certificates, bring the frames, don't tell anyone you're coming. The next day, I carried my little row of oak down to her office in a laundry basket with a towel over them, like babies in a stroller. I put them on her conference table under fluorescent lights that hum like bees when you're nervous. She and her paralegal took out gloved hands and handled my legacy. They opened the frames like surgeons. We lined up the coins, each in its slab with a serial number like a prisoner and a prince. We made a list. We found 2 switches. 2. Ruby's, which had the smudge, and Jonah's, my second grandson, who wouldn't notice if his car keys were swapped as long as the car still started. The replacements were clever fakes. In regular light, under glass, with a grandmother's faith, they'd pass. Under a loupe, under a lamp, they were lies. Not obvious. But measure the weight. Listen to the sound a coin makes when it touches glass. Steel rings thin. Copper sings. The fakes were steel-coated like a man with a polite face. I put my hands flat on the table to keep from throwing up. Aria exhaled through her nose like she'd run stairs. Okay, she said, in the tone doctors use in movies when they say, "We've got this," and you're supposed to believe them. We can get them back. How? I asked. We set a She stopped herself because she's careful. We create a structure, she said instead. We make it so that anyone who brings those coins into the light either does it honestly or trips a wire. My wires have names, I said. They've got my blood in them. I could feel anger like a fan going from low to high in my chest. I didn't raise pickpockets. No, she said. You raised children who picked partners who think love is a thing to leverage. There's a difference. And your kids are in a fog. It's common. We'll burn it off. Sometimes the help you need is the specific kindness of a woman who will say a hard sentence gently. She slid a folder toward me. We'll form a trust. Not for tax dodging or hiding, for protection. Call it the Copper and Clover Fund. You'll be trustee, I'll be counsel. 2 board members. Condition it so that the coins can't be sold until each grandchild is 30. If any are sold, even attempted, or consigned anywhere without notification and board consent, the property reverts immediately to the trust and the person attempting loses their beneficiary status. We put those conditions in a public filing so no one can claim ignorance, and we loop in the museum using an exhibition contract with a rider you approve. If someone tries to bring fakes, that's when we break out the serials. Right then, public. No room for stories. She watched me absorb that. There's also the matter of criminal behavior. I don't want to send my son's wife to jail, I said into the hum. Your son's wife might not be the one holding the bag, she said. And even if it is, consequences are not cruelty. They are reality. We aren't dragging anyone anywhere. We're opening a door and turning on the light. I signed papers with a pen she kept in a drawer that clicked like a metronome. I took deep breaths. I made a list of things I would need to do. Call the museum under the pretense of donating to their children's wing. Ask for a meeting. Take the original coins out of my house. Put them in a safe deposit box at a bank that doesn't know my family. Replace the real coins in the frames with fakes that matched the fakes currently in Ruby's and Jonah's frames, so that if someone came back to steal, they'd think they'd gotten away with something. Buy a cardigan that buttons all the way to the neck and stitch a tiny camera into the third button so that any future conversations would be more than my word. Pray the kind of prayer that sounds like you're calling your mother who moved out of state. We did all of that. I named 2 board members, a retired math teacher named Frida, who has changed this town in more ways than anyone will ever know, and the pastor, because he understands forgiveness and consequences better than most. We drafted the documents. Aria sent letters certified mail to my children and grandchildren. A dignified, simple notice of the trust's existence and its conditions. It was written like ginger tea, warm, sharp, soothing. They signed. That week, the humiliation began. 1. Sloane hosted a little tasting at Tanglewood Country Club to talk through event flow for the gala. I was not asked what stroganoff had to do with an event flow. I was asked to donate my authenticity as if it was a commodity like smoked salmon. At the dinner, they sat me at a side table with the florist and the DJ. I like both of those people. We talked about roses and playlists while my family sat at the head table and pretended they couldn't see me from where they were. When I stood to go to the restroom, Brent said into his napkin, "Oh, Eileen, while you're up, can you ask if they have more of that balsamic?" He didn't say Mom. He wanted me to know he didn't need to. I got the vinegar, and I put salt in it, because the world runs on 2 kinds of justice. The formal kind, and the little sweetness of a harmless petty vengeance that doesn't hurt anyone and lets you sleep. 2. At the museum planning meeting, the director, a man named Harlan Pike with cufflinks that matched his watch, looked at me like I'd brought a bag of yard sale stuff to Sotheby's, even after I explained the history. "Our donors appreciate best-in-class exhibits," he said. "We'll need documentation." "Of course," I said. I slid across the Numisgard certifications like a hand of cards. He took them with 2 fingers, like they'd been on service station floor. "And," he added, smiling nothing at all, "I assume we can cut video of your story for our socials?" "What does that mean?" I asked, because I in fact did not assume that. "Just a few pulls," he said. "Make it emotional." "I am emotional," I said. "Not available." He laughed. I didn't. 3. The next Sunday, I found the door to my house locked from the inside. Daniel and Sloane were there, sitting on my couch. "We were worried," Sloane said. The house didn't look rummaged. It looked like it had been looked while wearing gloves. The bowl where I keep keys was slightly off-center. The rug had a ripple like it had been lifted and smoothed poorly. The lock on my bedroom door had a fresh, shiny scratch on the plate where someone had slipped something thin between door and jamb, probably a credit card. I have watched enough shows to know. They'd left my kids' baby pictures askew by a half-inch, which is why anyone who ever thought mothers don't notice every degree of their house's angle is a fool. "What were you worried about?" I asked, dropping my purse. It thumped heavier than a woman's purse. because I had a copy of every document in it. That you were making choices without us, Daniel said. My sweet boy, my good man. He looked tired. I am 70 years old, I said. You hope to be so lucky. They wanted me to make them co-trustees. They had a notary in the car. They said the museum needed things signed quickly, which is always a word that means before you can ask someone who knows better. They framed it as inclusion. They told me they didn't want to be left out of the narrative. We are a family good at narratives. We are less good at footnotes. I offered them pie. I did not sign anything. Later, when they left, I sat on the bed in the room Frank and I shared for 40 years. I cried a sound that makes birds quiet. Then I put on my cardigan with the little camera in the third button, and I pressed the stitch that turns it on. I am not mean. I am not cruel. But I am very, very tired of finding myself in rooms where men in suits and women in statement necklaces expect my reverence for their positions to be bigger than my love for my people. That's the day I changed my mind about how this would go. I would stop asking permission to save them. 2 mornings later, my neighbor's kid came by to ask if he could use my lawnmower. He's 16. He called me Mrs. P and offered to fill the tank. He left. 10 minutes after that, a van pulled up in front of my house. It was white with no lettering, which is the universal sign for do not ask questions or you'll end up involved. 2 men got out carrying a glass dome cover like the kind you put over a cake. They looked at the house number, looked at a piece of paper, looked at each other. They walked up my path. Can I help you? I asked, opening the door without opening the screen. We're here to pick up the item, one said. He had a tattoo of a sparrow on his wrist. I like men with sparrows. They mean something to someone. What item? I said, deadpan happy. The second man, older, tipped his head at the hallway behind me. The display case, he said. We don't accidentally say who we are, Arya had told me. We ask questions. So I asked, who sent you? Queen City Numismatics, the older man said. He was about to say more when the younger one kicked his ankle. We'll come back, he added. They did not come back. I drove to the bank with my laundry basket like I was taking a toddler to daycare for the first time. I put the basket on the counter and said to the teller, I'd like to open a safe deposit box, please. She asked for ID. I slid her my whole wallet. She laughed. We only need 2 forms, she said gently. I said, keep the rest. I'm feeling generous. The banker led me to the vault, where the air is always cool, no matter what month you're in. I put my babies in there and shut the box. See you soon, I whispered to 6 pieces of metal like it was rational. Maybe it wasn't. But I have had rational shoved in my face all week, and look where it got me. Arya called with an update. Museum contract is drafted, she said, sounding pleased in the way only a woman whose mouth tastes like victory paperwork can sound. I tucked in a sweet little rider. She paused for drama. Any item displayed under the copper and clover label must be verified by serial number using the Numisguard registry before any public unveiling. In the event of a mismatch, the museum will immediately suspend any auction planned and call for a board review with council present. And this is the part that will give me glee on my deathbed, signatories who knowingly attempt to consign under false pretenses will trigger a referral to the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. You do love a clause, I said. The clause loves me back, she replied. A month of small humiliations passed. I was seated at a table labelled Family Friends at my own granddaughter's bridal tasting. My name was misspelled on the mock-up of the gala program as Ellen Potter. I was asked to tell the story of the pennies in under 30 seconds for the video opener. And when I refused, a girl with an iPad tried to explain to me why authenticity performs well online. I told her, "It performs well in the kitchen too," and she typed something frantic in her notes. Brent brought me a drink I didn't request and told me not to worry. "You can just show up and smile pretty," he said. And I swear to God I have not had a rage blackout in a public place in 20 years, but I almost saw red. "I'm too old to smile pretty," I said sweetly. "I smile honest. It's more valuable." When I tried to speak to Ava alone, there was always someone nearby. She was never without someone. Her fiancé, her stepmother, her cousin who needs everything to be a joke, so she doesn't have to admit how scared she is of silence. I got 2 minutes in a hallway with her once, while she waited for the bathroom at a restaurant so fancy its menu had more words in French than Ohioans have patience for. "I'm worried," I said. "Some of the frames were tampered with. Yours is in a safe." She stared at me like I'd told her a fairy tale with a mean witch who stole kids. "Brent would never," she said. "I didn't say his name," I replied. "He wouldn't," she said again, and then her face did a thing I will never forgive him for. It crumpled. "He gets excited, he talks big, but he loves me." "I don't doubt he loves you," I said, "because I don't. I have been loved by men who were dangerous to trust." "I doubt he loves me." She laughed, embarrassed. "I can't do this now," she said, and it was true. She couldn't. That week, on a Monday, I drove to Columbus to meet with a man named Jonah Cates, recommended by Aria. He's a private investigator with a face that looks like oatmeal. Comforting, forgettable, warm. He wears clothes a half step too large. He is the reason I now know what someone looks like when they text their friend outside a meeting and plan to give me a smile like they didn't just fake me out. We set eyes on him at a coffee shop and would forget he was there by the time the coffee cooled. "I just need you to show me what's happening when I'm not in the room," I told him. "I'm not building a criminal case. I'm building a story. But stories need details, not vibes." He nodded like he'd been waiting his whole career for a client to say vibes with a straight face. "It'll be clean," he said. "You'll have timing, faces, audio where it's legal. You'll have movement. You'll see who calls who after they leave your driveway. You'll have the thing you already know spelled out." He earned every dollar I paid him in a single week. He sat at the bar of the restaurant down the street from the coin shop and nursed seltzers while he listened. He followed the white van when it left a different house across town with a grandfather clock in the back and ended up at a pawn shop you wouldn't take your mum to. He videoed an exchange behind a strip mall where a familiar too-tight polo man handed a familiar young clerk a plastic case and got an envelope that softened in his pocket as if money had weight like water. He watched Brent move like he owned the block. He also caught my son Daniel on camera in a parking lot behind the bakery, talking to someone I didn't know. When the man's face turned, my heart dropped. It was Harlan, the museum director. He handed Daniel a folder, and Daniel, my sweet boy, took it like a drowning person takes a hand, whether they can swim or not. Jonah sent me the video. He didn't say a word. "What did he tell you?" I asked Daniel when I sat across from him at my kitchen table and set down 2 glasses of iced tea like we were 2 people having an ordinary conversation about insurance premiums. It was 5 o'clock. Men with no business in the back of their throats call that the witching hour because it glows with the things they don't say. He looked at his lap. "He said donors don't like surprises," he said. "He said it would be easier for the museum to align with storytelling if we clarified ownership. Which means? I asked, my voice steady as the table. He met my eyes. If you made me co-trustee. And? And, he said, I told him I would ask you. He swallowed. I'm asking. I didn't cry. I stood up and kissed his head. I'm saying no, I said. And I'm asking you to love me after that. I saw the pain rise up through him and settle in his shoulders. I hate disappointing you, he said. I hate that you think that's what this is, I said. This is me disappointing your plan, not you. I could see my boy again for a second, the one who scraped his knee and looked at me like I had the power to rewind time. I don't, but I have a different power. I can hit pause. The week of the gala arrived like a freight train if freight trains smelled like hairspray and panic. Aria emailed me a final contract to review. I read every line and then read it again. We filed notices. The trust was live. The museum had a copy. So did the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Office. I had a call scheduled with a woman named Maya Ortiz there, who said, "We love a case with paperwork as tight as this. Call me if anyone so much as breathes wrong." I framed that sentence on the wall in my head. The night before the gala, I walked through my house and touched everything I own. This is not dramatic. This is how you say goodbye to innocence. I pressed the frames of the children's pictures into the right angle on the wall so that in the morning light they'd catch the sun and look like the small miracles they are. I set out my dress. It is navy. It has sleeves. It is the kind of dress a woman can sit down in and stand up from without thinking about what anyone will see. I ironed it like I used to iron uniforms. The heat made the house smell like summer and work. I slept for 2 hours and woke to a thought. Move the files. I put the trust documents and the certificates into a different bag. I put that bag into a laundry hamper under towels. I told myself I was being paranoid. I reminded myself that paranoia keeps your grandchildren in your arms and not in some man's vault. At noon, my phone pinged. A text from an unknown number. Change of plan. Bring items to Rivergate Hotel early for pre-check. Followed by Per H. Pike. I read it twice. I called Aria. Do not bring anything anywhere early, she said so loudly I held the phone away. That is not a thing. Also, I just got a call from a blocked number saying our rider needs a revision. They can kick rocks. I drove to the bank instead. I took out the originals. I held them without gloves like an animal. Forgive me, collectors. It was time. I put them into a small, ugly purse that I bought for $10 at a yard sale on purpose. I put that inside a tote with a picture of a cat on it, so bad it rolled back around to good. I double knot tied it. I carried it like a newborn to my car. On the way to the museum, a pickup truck followed me a little closer than anyone polite would. I am not a dramatic woman, except when the radio plays Motown. But I will say I turned right 3 times to see if that truck was a tail. It was. I pulled into the lot by the police station and let my face go blank when it pulled in too. They kept going. I did not. The gala looked exactly like a gala should look in a place that used to be a post office and now holds glass and gold and stories. There were banners with names of big donors. There was a bar with a line of people whose shoes could pay for a whole month of groceries. There were women pretending they knew how to walk in shoes like that, and men pretending they knew how to read the art labels as more than prices. The room hummed with the money that comes from feeling like you're in the right room at the right time with the right people. It is a high. If I were a dealer of anything, that's what I'd sell. They wheeled in the display. The glass dome gleamed like a hug around nothing. The little circles were empty. My circles. Next to it, a sign on an easel. The Lucky Penny Legacy. Behind that, a big screen with a slide that said, "In Gratitude, Eileen Porter." Someone had chosen a photo of me from the library newsletter. I looked like myself in it, my chin up, my hair doing what hair does. They hadn't airbrushed out my age. I liked that. I thanked the intern in my head. Ava found me. She looked like a painting. She hugged me like she was hoping to breathe my air. "I'm sorry," she said, fast into my shoulder. "For what?" I asked. "Everything," she said. And then, like she couldn't believe she'd said that out loud, she laughed. I hugged her longer because she was shaking. As she stepped back, Brent slid in. "Ladies," he said, "looking lovely." "Looking like a man who knows a judge socially," I said. He laughed because he thought I was flattering him. Oh, sweetheart, I wasn't. They called people to their seats. The MC thanked people with names on wings. The director stepped up to applause that was polite, but not heartfelt. Maybe I'm projecting. He did his spiel. Then he introduced the exhibit. My family clapped. Sloane wiped a tear she must keep in her purse because it comes out on demand. Brent took Ava's hand and squeezed it so tight I could see the white of his knuckles. The men in navy suits I mentioned? They appeared quietly at the back. I stood in the shadow of a pillar because women like me know where to stand. When the veil over the display was lifted theatrically by two docents in matching smiles, the pennies under glass caught light like a trick. There they were, in a circle. 6 little suns. They looked like nothing to people who don't know. They looked like everything to anyone who does. What does your legacy look like under glass? My heart knew the answer before my mind did. Too quiet. The MC, a man whose face looks like a morning show, did his voice. These pennies. Check the cereals? I said into the microphone next to me that an usher in a tux had brought to the floor to ask donors how they were enjoying the salmon. He did not expect me to take it. He did not expect me to stand. Women like me are supposed to sit. Check the cereals. And that is where we started, where I held my breath and waited to see if my small fuse would reach the powder. Above me, the slide hung. To my right, Aria appeared at my elbow like a magician's assistant, except she's the one who sawed a problem in half and pulled it out whole. That's when everything did indeed start to blow. The docents looked at each other. The MC stammered. Harlan laughed the way men laugh when they think someone is making a charming scene. "Oh, Mrs. Porter," he said into his own mic, in a voice like he was cuffing a child affectionately. "I assure you, our experts—" "Read the clause," I said, more quietly. He blinked. The room went so silent you could hear the champagne sigh. He put his hand to his ear like he didn't hear me. I put my mouth nearer the mic and enunciated like a teacher terrified of a substitute mispronouncing a kid's name. "Read the clause." He had to. He had no choice. The contract was on a stand at the side of the stage for exactly this reason, to make donors feel included. He read the rider. The men in navy suits moved forward. Maya, from the AG's office, slipped in behind them like she'd been there the whole time in a black dress that looked like she'd have to prove nothing to nobody after she took her heels off. Somewhere, a little alarm went off on a security guard's belt. People turned like fish in a school, together. The cases were opened. The coins were lifted with tweezers and held to light. The serial numbers etched on the slabs were read aloud by a woman with a voice that will be in my dreams for years. One matched. Then another didn't. Then a third didn't. 3 of 6. Harlan stopped smiling. Sloane stopped breathing. Brent did math on his face. This can be explained, he said, loud, overcompensating. And if you've ever seen a man throw up a shield made of words, you know it looks like this. He reached toward the display as if touching something would fix a wrong that started long ago. One of the navy suits stepped in front of him like a curtain. Ava sat down hard on the step at the end of our row. She looked up at me, like a child looks at a parent when the magician pulls a coin from behind her ear, and she knows for the first time that grown-ups lie, but some lies are mercy, and some are theft. She opened her mouth, and no sound came out. I put my hand on her hair like I did when she was feverish as a toddler. It is the same softness. "Do it now," I said, not into a mic this time, but to Aria. She had been waiting for my cue. She dialed. The screen above us changed from the slide with my name to a video. The gala's AV team, who, God bless them, are the heroes of all public events, had been tipped. They knew where to press play. The video showed a hallway, the coin shop. We watched the young clerk hand a plastic case to a man in a too-tight polo. We watched the man slip an envelope. We watched Harlan stand in a parking lot and say the words, "Align with storytelling again," like he'd written it on his mirror that morning. We watched Sloane's hand, my son's wife's hand, twist the screw on a hinge in my hallway. The camera in my cardigan's button caught her glance up and down the hall, and the little smile she wears when she knows she's getting away with something she thinks is for the greater good. The room reacted like rooms do. A murmur, a wave, a rustle of suits, a glass set down too hard. A muffled, "Oh my God," from someone in the back, who will later tell the story at dinner parties with dramatic pauses. Someone whispered, "Lawsuit." Someone whispered, "Arrest." Someone started to clap and then stopped because they didn't know what side of history would come out looking heroic. The men in suits did their job. They did not handcuff anyone on stage. This is not a movie, and I was grateful. But they did lean in to Brent, say words that made his mouth go dry, ask him to step away. He looked like a man who'd never been told no and couldn't handle the word having no synonyms in that moment. He had a choice. He chose the thing small men choose: charm. He smiled and tried to shake hands with the man, telling him he was in trouble. The man did not take his hand. Harlan walked off stage with his hand on his chest, like he could steady himself by pressing his heart into submission. The crowd parted. No one wanted to brush shoulders with consequences. Sloane looked at Daniel. He looked back like he was trying to translate a book written in a language he never learned, because no one taught him women could be villains and still paint their nails nude. That's where the night split. That's where Ava's world tilted and mine righted itself. That's where the pennies stopped being cute and became the axis around which we turned. Now. Before I tell you what happened next, before I rewind one more time to say the thing I almost hesitated, before I show you where the real coins were and how they ended up under glass at that exact moment, I want you to hear my voice, because the internet will rearrange it if I'm not careful. I did not set out to punish. I set out to protect. Sometimes protection looks like a soft hand on a forehead. Sometimes it looks like a contract you can't wriggle out of. Sometimes it looks like a grandma in Navy standing in a room full of people who like free shrimp and telling a man in a tux to read. "You're still here? Good. Breathe. Sip water. Comment with your city if you haven't yet. I like knowing where people's kitchens are. Makes me feel less alone. Now let's put some flesh back on the bones." The day after I met with Aria, the very first time, she introduced me to a woman named Mimi at Numisgard. A voice like a violin string. Careful. She told me a thing that turned out to be a hinge. We can embed micro-etchings on our slabs, only visible under a certain light. She sent me a kit that looked like a dentist might own it. I used it at my kitchen table, with Mimi on the phone walking me through. I numbered each slab again, under the visible number. 2 systems. Redundancy is not overkill when your enemy is a man who believes charm can breach a vault. I mention this because at the gala, when the first number didn't match, Harlan tried to spin. "There must be a typo," he said. "We used an old list." Aria nodded. "There may be a typo," she said pleasantly. "Why don't we check the internal etch?" And that's when the room learned a new trick. We turned down the lights and turned on a pen light. The tiny number glowed like a constellation inside the plastic. That's what you heard when the room gasped. Not the revelation that there was a lie, but the proof burning in the plastic in a way a donor couldn't argue with at dinner the next night when he wanted to sound above the fray. It's hard to be above a glow. When the first glow didn't match, the second glow did, and the third didn't. The museum's counsel stood. He whispered to Harlan. Harlan nodded and stepped forward to the microphone like a man walking into an MRI. He started to say, "We apologize for the confusion," when Aria leaned in and said, not into the mic, but loud enough for 3 rows to hear, "We don't confuse theft with confusion." "Now, about the 'do it now,'" I said at the start. That wasn't just to cue the video. I had set another little fuse weeks earlier that led to a fuse in a different building. A check had been sitting with the museum's development office for 3 days. It was a check from the Copper and Clover Fund. It was sizable enough to make a certain kind of board member sit up. It came with a letter. When the pennies are displayed publicly as contracted, the check becomes an endowment for the children's programming wing. If the conditions are not met in good faith at the gala unveiling, the check becomes void, and the fund will seek another partner. Let me tell you, there is money museums like better than a check. An endowed check. They like their money with roots. When Harlan realized the rider he'd signed, cheerily, I might add, also bound his budget to my integrity, he fell back into the worst posture a person in power can take. The squat of someone thinking about how to shift blame under the weight of public expectations. It would have been pitiable if he hadn't spent a month pretending to own my grandchildren's story. Security asked Brent to step into a side room. He went. He did not go gracefully. He did not go like a hero. He went like a man who'd been told the party is not for him, for once. Sloane sat perfectly still. Stillness is how some people hope to disappear. She didn't cry. Not yet. She waited to see if the wind would blow in her direction. When it didn't, she made her eyes water and turned to Daniel. He did not put his hand on her knee. I noticed. I am his mother. Ava stood up like her knees betrayed her. She walked to the stage and turned to the room. This was not planned. Nothing about her posture said speech. But life dropped something heavy in her arms, and she is the kind of woman who does not let heavy things hit the floor. "I'm sorry," she said into the air. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry to everyone. My family, this town, the kids who read in this building, for trusting the wrong parts of me. I'm sorry I didn't listen to the woman who taught me to read in the first place." She looked at me. People turned to see who she meant, like they hadn't been watching us all night. "My grandma told me years ago," she continued, "what's yours won't get lost." I thought she was talking about jobs and boys. She was talking about dignity. You could feel wealth recalibrate in that room. The ladies in their rented diamonds felt their rings like they were suddenly heavy. The men with watches bigger than their wrists checked the time and found themselves unpunctual. Courage resets clocks. This is when the room had to decide if it was a gala about narrative or about action. God bless them. Someone started to clap. You never know where that first clap will come from. This one came from the teacher who runs the museum's summer camp. It spread. It rose. I saw the development officer cry for real for probably the first time in her career. Maya from Consumer Protection stepped forward then and introduced herself quietly to me. "We'll handle the next part," she said, and I wanted to kiss her on both cheeks like we were at a wedding in some country where people know how to honor the women who save them. The board held an emergency meeting upstairs. They asked me to come. I declined. I'm not a board person. I am a kitchen table person. Instead, I took the microphone again. "We're going to take a short break," I said, my voice calm like a woman telling a classroom of 34th graders that we're going to have indoor recess. "Then I'm going to tell you a story. It will be under a minute." The crowd laughed. I waited. "Before we do, if you have a drink, sip it. And if you have your phone out, put it down. This is a museum. Try being present. Do you know what power feels like when it happens this late in your life? It feels like standing in your kitchen with your feet on linoleum in socks and hearing your dead husband say, "You did it, babe." The rest of the night was not clean. It was messy. It included apologies and non-apologies. It included one security guard with the gentlest hands escorting Sloane out when she started telling the reporter from the station downtown that this was a deep fake smear campaign. And I swear if the internet didn't ruin us, it sure did give us phrases to laugh at during insomnia. After, in the corridor outside the exhibition hall, Ava stood with her back to the wall, like if she didn't, it would roll. "I didn't know," she said to me. "Not all of it. He told me he could move the coins to a vault so you'd feel safer, and then it would be easier to do good." He used that phrase. Do good. And I wanted so badly to do good and be seen doing it. "I'm sorry." She said it again. And again. Like she could stack apologies into a stare-up out of the mess. I put my hands on her shoulders and then stroked her hair behind her ear, the way I did when she was a baby, and I needed to see her whole face. "We'll sort it," I said, "when the dust is in a pan." Somewhere behind us, a woman from the museum whispered to her colleague, "Isn't she the librarian?" And the colleague whispered back, reverent, "That is not just the librarian." I will remember that until I die. If you're waiting for the arrests, you'll be disappointed. They came later, not on camera. We do not live inside a neatly packaged ark. We live in Ohio. People get arraigned at 8 a.m. on Tuesdays, and you pick up your bread and nod to the woman who sat on the end of your pew their entire childhood. But we do, sometimes, get exposure. And exposure is a better disinfectant than anger because it doesn't go sour. The news vans came to the museum, and then to my house, and then, God help me, to the library. I spoke once, in the lobby by the returns slot, to a reporter who wore her cardigan like armor. I said 2 sentences. "This is not about money. This is about a story no one gets to tell for us." Then I went back to my desk and checked in a stack of picture books with a joy I haven't felt in years. You want the numbers. I know you do. The pennies are, each, valued around $340,000 today because the market for rarity is like the market for good news, hungry. We had them appraised by someone who doesn't also sell you the appraisal. The trust holds them, intact. Not because we're hoarding value, because the story we want to tell with them isn't done. The interest from the trust endowment, because the trust isn't just coins, it's also the check we wrote to the museum redirecting to the library, now pays for reading tutors for kids in our district who got told by the pandemic that education was optional. You also want the names. You want to know who got fired, who cried, who humbled themselves without the extra letter. You want to know if the fiancé is still a fiancé. You want to know if my son is speaking to me. You want to know if the man with the cufflinks resigned. You want the "then what?" the part behind the headline. Me too. I lived it. And if you'll bear with me a little longer, I'll tell you, because the "then what" is where you actually live your life. After the gala, after the room turned back into a room, after the janitors swept up the programs and the caterers took home the unserved shrimp in plastic tubs they'll eat, standing up in paper hats at midnight. We had a family meeting. Sloane did not come. She sent a text that made it clear we'd see her face on Facebook before we'd see it in my living room again. Daniel came. He brought coffee. He put his phone face down on the table, and the action was so loud it made me want to hug him and shake him at the same time. "I messed up," he said. It takes a man of a certain caliber to say those 4 words, like they're not a confession, but a door. I love my son. He opens doors. "You'll make this right," I said. "I don't know how," he said. "We'll learn," I replied, because learning is my whole brand. Ava came with her hair in a bun that tells me she was up late thinking. She took off her ring without ceremony and set it on the table. It sat there like a coin in a jar. We all stared at it, not because of what it cost, but because of what it meant. She slid it to the middle. No one touched it. "I can't marry someone who thinks I'm a brand," she said simply. Marissa came with cookies. She does that when the family is in triage. Her husband came after his shift. He hugged me and whispered, "You're scary sometimes." I said, "Thank you." He laughed. "That was a compliment," he added. "I know." We called Ruby and Jonah and the rest of the kids and explained what had happened. I did not use words like felony because children shouldn't hold that and finish their math homework in the same hour. We said, breaking trust, and they understood. They're old enough to start leaking who we are. Ruby, bless her, said, "Do I still get my penny when I'm 30? And I said, "If you want it." And she said, "I want it." And that was that. Aria did what lawyers do in the days after the explosion. She sent letters. She filed things. She sent the video to places where it would matter. Maya called me at 9 p.m. one night after she'd put her own kids to bed. "We've got them on paper now," she said. "And we've got them on film. This is going to be bigger than your family. I need you to know that." It was. Within a month, the story had turned from local gala disrupted by grandma to regional dealer allegedly switched rare coins in consignment scheme. Other families came forward. A man in Dayton with a timeline that lined up like clock hands with mine. A woman in Lexington who said quietly, he called it unlocking value too. A retiree in Florida who had shipped his copper cent to a vault and watched it be replaced with something his granddaughter immediately said, "Looks funny." Because sometimes kids notice the thing you need to notice before you do. The AG's office filed a case with enough paper to snap a rubber band around twice. The museum called a special session. They asked Harlan to resign. He cried. I watched him wipe his eyes on television and felt both sorry and sure. Sorry because I know he's a person. Sure because people in that job don't get to be sloppy with other people's history. He took a job with a private foundation somewhere with palm trees. I hope he learns how to be a better man in a room where the carpet doesn't hide as many stains. The museum, this is the part that will make the cynics cough, kept the endowment in good faith. They created a children's wing with a reading nook that looks like a treehouse, and there is a plaque near the entrance. It says, in honor of the women who told us stories before we knew we needed them. It does not say my name. It doesn't need to. I know who asked for those words. The day I saw it, I cried like a rainstorm, and then I sat in a chair shaped like a leaf and read to a little boy who asked me if dragons were real. Depends what you mean by real, I said. He nodded like I'd told him a secret. Brent, if you're waiting for me to tell you he went to prison, I won't. That's not my line to write. He did, however, experience the thing he fears most. He became publicly untrustworthy. Deals dried up. His name stopped being a card people wanted in their Rolodex and became a warning whispered in women's kitchens while pie cooled. He pled to a lesser charge. He paid restitution. He returned what could be returned. He sent letters to the families who would receive them. I got one. It said, "I was raised to believe providing made me good." I wrote back, "Providing and stealing have never been synonyms. Learn a new definition of good." He didn't write again. Sloane? She found a support group for spouses who lose the life they curated when the foundation crumbles. That's my uncharitable way of saying she started counseling. She and Daniel separated. She moved to an apartment by the river with granite counters and a view. She posts pictures of the sunset. I pray for her, the way you pray for women who thought the only way to exist was to be seen from the right angle. I hope she finds the superpower she was given before anyone ever took her picture. It's called a spine. Daniel? He moved home for 6 weeks, not into my house, into the house of himself. He learned to cook 3 meals from a book with a gorgeous woman on the cover who looks like she knows exactly what cumin does to a man. He came over on Tuesdays for dinner and did my dishes without being asked. He started therapy. I could kiss the feet of every therapist in this state. He is better now. He is back to being the man who brings coffee and puts his phone face down and means it. Ava? She came to the library the week after the gala and sat in the kids section, not crying, just sitting. I sat with her. After a while, she said, "I didn't hear you." It wasn't blame. I said, "I whispered. You had a man shouting in your ear." We sat in silence, the kind that heals. Then she said, "What do I do with a $340,000 penny?" And I laughed so hard a kid shushed me. "You put it in a trust," I said. "You let it earn while you live. You don't owe your pain to an audience." She nodded like a person memorizing something for later. In September, we held a small ceremony in the children's wing. No press, just family and that kid who shushed me. We brought the pennies, not the originals. I'm not a fool, just their little framed photos. And we told the stories again. I let each grandchild hold their own slab once more under supervision like a mother duck. They're heavy in your hand, those slabs. Heavier than they look, like responsibility. That's when I gave them the last part of my plan. Remember the fuse? Here's the boom that didn't sound like a boom, just a line of ink. In the trust, there's a clause that says, upon their 30th birthday, each grandchild has the choice between taking their coin, a 1943 copper penny, or transferring it to the Copper and Clover Endowment in exchange for an annual payout equal to 5% of its market value, forever, as long as the library holds story hour. They can do this even if they marry, and even if their spouse believes in unlocking value, and even if times get tight. That way, the value unlocked is not a day's auction high. It is safety and meaning walking around like a person. It's groceries, it's braces, it's shoes that fit, and a mechanic you trust when your Ford starts making that sound. I said it out loud. I watched them absorb. Jonah laughed first, that sweet boy. Grandma built us a scholarship from ourselves, he said. I said, I built you a long-range weapon against the kind of short-range thinking that gets people in trouble. We all grinned. We ate cookies. Someone put on music from the 70s. We danced in the aisles between shelves, while 3 toddlers stared like maybe adults had been hiding the good part of life. Months passed. Winter came in with a grin and a bare-knuckle fist. The library's heating system did that clanky thing old pipes do. We raised money to fix the radiator. We found a donor who said, I won't give unless you put my name on a room. We said, we will call it the room where kids learn to read. He gave anyway. Then, in spring, when the yellow forsythia showed up like someone had finally said the password, I got a letter in the mail addressed in a hand I didn't know. It was from a woman in California. She'd seen the story on some aggregator site that lives off other people's labor. She wrote, My abuela gave me a nickel. It wasn't rare. It still saved me. Thank you for reminding me how the world actually turns. And here, finally, because I promised you a beginning that would make the ending feel like a surprise even though we've been walking toward it, is the part I wanted to tell you since the very first line of this whole thing. The night of the gala, after the coins were checked and the video played and the crowd gasped and the suits did their work, the real coins, my babies, were not actually in the building. They were in the pocket of the woman who taught this town to read grants. Mine. They were in my ugly purse under my chair. The fakes were on display. The only way the trust rider would trigger is if someone tried to swap in the fakes without the matching serials. They did. Publicly. That's what you watched. Men and women caught trying to make fake honest. This part matters because too often we turn a wrong into a story about how we found truth like it fell from the ceiling. Truth was placed there by a woman with a needle who stitched a camera into a button, who etched numbers into plastic, who made friends at the AG's office, who put her laundry basket on the front seat of her car and drove like a heist movie with a cup of gas station coffee and a prayer. This is not luck. This is labor. So when that room heard me say, check the serials, they heard a tiny command that rode on the back of months of work done by women who pack lunches and file paperwork, and can tell by the way the light hits a frame whether a hinge has been turned. That's the kind of secret weapon I wish on all of you. A plan, a friend, a clause, a camera someone can't see, a belief that your kindness is not consent, and a granddaughter bold enough to stand under 1,000 watts and say, I was wrong, I'm sorry. That's the glow I want on my face when the lights go out. We are months past that night now. People still ask me, in the Kroger aisle near the canned tomatoes, are you the penny lady? I laugh and say, I am. They tell me their stories. I listen. Sometimes I give them my number and say, if you ever need a clause, I know a woman. Aria has more business than she knows what to do with now. She worries about the ethics of benefiting from chaos. I tell her, you benefit from making order. She sighs and color codes a file. And yes, because some of you are here for the petty as much as the profound. The next Tanglewood event, they sat me at the head table. Eileen, the event planner said, breathless, so honored. And I said, I will sit there if the staff eats at tables and not in the hallway. And I watched them carve out a place for the people who kept the night in motion. Sometimes power is a seat. Sometimes it's giving someone else one. If you've lasted with me this long, and I hope you have, because the internet has taught you how to click away when you should stay, I want to end with a thing small enough to fit in your palm. I keep the jar of pennies still, not the rare ones, the long-lived ordinary ones. I hand them out at story hour when a kid listens all the way through. I say, lucky penny, And they say, "Do I have to give it back when it's worth something?" And I say, "It's worth something now." They grin, pocket it, and run to find another book. That's the act of faith that keeps me getting out of bed. The idea that ordinary passed hand to hand is enough. And we're not done. Oh, honey, we never are. The trust earns, the library fills, the museum hosts quiet exhibits now where kids' drawings hang next to quilts. The coin dealer moved his shop to a smaller space. There's a new sign in the window. We verify, and we return. I stop in sometimes and buy a cheap wheat penny for $1, just to remind myself that value can be arbitrary and meaning is not. When my next grandbaby is born, yes, at 70 I still get that gift. I'll do my ritual. I'll touch the frames. I'll light a candle. I'll whisper a wish. I'll pick a penny that means something because I say it does. I'll put it in a frame. I'll hang it high. And I'll make sure the hinge is tight. Always the hinge. Remember that. Before I go make dinner, yes, even heroes have to brown ground beef and decide if tonight is a peas night or a corn night. Hit that subscribe button if you want more truth with your tea. And tell me where you're listening from. If you've got a lucky coin in your pocket, I want to know what story it holds. If you don't, here's one you can borrow. Once upon a time, a grandmother taught a town to read a serial number, and a family learned the difference between legacy and brand. And somewhere there's a kid at a little table with his feet not touching the floor, yet whispering along as I turn the page, thinking, "Did you hear that? The dragon. It's real." End.